What happens when a royal sits down for one of America's most prestigious interviews, only to walk out in fury? Prince Harry's much-hyped 60 Minutes conversation with Anderson Cooper began with poise and politeness. But as the questions deepened, the calm cracked, and the tension inside that small studio grew thick enough to taste. This wasn't just an interview. It was a slow-motion collision between a seasoned journalist and a restless royal, ending in one of television's most unforgettable walkouts. The room was quiet. Minimalist, 2 chairs, a coffee table, and the hush that 60 Minutes is known for. No stage lights, no audience, just gravity. Anderson Cooper leaned forward, hand extended, offering that trademark calm. "Harry, thank you for being here." Harry nodded, posture loose but edged with something taut beneath the surface. "Well, I suppose the world expects me to explain myself," he said. "So here I am," Anderson chuckled softly, easing the tension. "That's what these conversations are for. People get to hear directly from you." For a few minutes, it all went smoothly. Light talk of life in America, family, and adjusting to a world outside royal protocol. But Harry's tone carried a bite. "America's been tolerable," he said dryly. "At least here I don't have to bow to outdated rituals or pretend my family understands me. It's freeing to live somewhere I'm seen as a person, not a spare part." Anderson didn't flinch. He'd dealt with presidents and war generals. Ego was part of the job. "Still," he said evenly, "isn't there comfort in tradition? A sense of stability?" Harry's smirk was brief, almost bitter. "Comfort for whom? The ones on golden thrones? Tradition's just a cage with better wallpaper. My family hides behind it because it masks the cracks." The air tightened. The crew felt it, though no one moved. Anderson stayed composed. "That's an interesting view. But many still see the monarchy as a symbol of unity. What do you say to them?" "They're infatuated with a fairy tale," Harry shot back. "They don't see the machinery, the manipulation, the control. They cheer for the crown and ignore who bleeds for it." Anderson paused. He sensed the escalation but didn't retreat. That's where truth lives, on the edge of discomfort. He softened his tone. "Let's talk about family. You've spoken about Meghan and your children with great emotion. How is life as a husband and father away from the institution?" Harry smiled faintly, but his jaw stayed tight. "Life as a husband and father is exactly what it should be, mine. And the press has no right to dissect it. Nor does the monarchy. I protect what's mine. That's more than they ever did for me." Anderson nodded, letting the words hang before pressing gently. "When you speak publicly, in interviews, documentaries, your book, you open that door yourself. Do you see any contradiction between demanding privacy and sharing so openly on your terms?" Harry's eyes flared. "That's a tired argument. Privacy doesn't mean silence, it means control. I decide what the world knows. If people can't grasp that, they're not worth addressing." The warmth was gone now, replaced by a taut quiet that hummed under the lights. Anderson's smile was faint, but deliberate. That's certainly one way of putting it. Some might say that sounds selective. Harry leaned back, arms crossed. Selective? No, it's called freedom. Something you, as an American, should understand better than most. The words landed like a challenge. The silence stretched. Cameras rolled. The crew barely breathed. 2 men sat across from each other, one built for restraint, the other burning through it. Anderson lowered his pen, calm but calculating. Inside, he knew this was no ordinary interview. This was a match, and Harry had just lit it. Anderson shifted in his seat, his tone soft but steady. "You've spoken often about your struggles with the institution," he began. "But I want to ask about something deeper. Your mother, Princess Diana, became a global symbol, not just because of her role, but because of the way she connected with people. Do you feel you carry her legacy?" For a moment, Harry's lips pressed into a thin line. The air between them thickened. "Legacy," he said finally, the word sharp as a blade. "That's a word the media loves. You built her up, tore her down, and now expect me to wear her memory like a crown I should be thankful for. I'm not my mother's replacement, and I won't let anyone use her name as a measuring stick." Anderson absorbed the blow, nodding calmly. "Fair point," he said. "But many people still see you as continuing her spirit, her independence, her willingness to challenge tradition. Isn't that something you embrace?" Harry gave a dry laugh, leaning back with folded arms. You all want to turn me into a symbol because it makes for better headlines. I'm not here to be another candle in the wind. My mother's memory belongs to me, to my family, not to the public, and certainly not to journalists looking for poetry in her pain. The words landed heavy, almost accusatory, but Anderson didn't flinch. His voice stayed even. All right, he said gently. Then let's pivot, Megan. The two of you have spoken about the difficulties you've faced. Some critics argue your marriage pulled you further from your family. How do you respond to that? Harry's eyes darkened. Critics? He snapped. You mean the people who've never met her? The ones who sit behind desks and pretend to understand what marriage means? Megan didn't pull me away, she saved me. She freed me from a suffocating institution. Anyone who can't see that is blind. Anderson remained still, his tone unshaken. When you describe her as saving you, he said carefully, doesn't that suggest that without her you might still be trapped? That she holds an almost singular power in your life? Harry smirked, shaking his head. Singular power? No. It's called partnership. Something most journalists can't grasp because you're too busy dissecting other people's relationships instead of living your own. The sting hung in the air, but Anderson's composure didn't falter. He scribbled a note, then pivoted again. You've also spoken about raising your children in America. How is fatherhood different here than it might have been in the UK? Harry exhaled sharply, impatience bleeding through. It's simple, he said. Here my children get to be normal. They're not props for photographers or pawns in a royal chess game. And unlike back home, they have a father who protects them. Anderson tilted his head slightly. So you don't believe your family would have protected them? Harry's tone was almost mocking now. Protected them? The monarchy doesn't even protect its own heirs, let alone the spare's children. My kids would have been sacrifices on the altar of tradition. That's not family. That's exploitation. Anderson sighed quietly, patience thinning but still intact. Some might argue, he said, that by stepping into documentaries, books, and interviews like this one, you're still putting them in the spotlight, just on your own terms. How do you reconcile that? Harry leaned forward, voice hardening. I don't need to reconcile anything. I decide what's best for my family. Not the media, not the crown, and definitely not people like you. The temperature in the room dropped. Even the camera crew froze, Anderson's jaw flexed, his restraint visible. It seems, he said carefully, that every question about accountability, Harry, you redirect toward control. Do you think there's any room for balance? Harry's smirk deepened. Balance is a myth. You either control your story or it controls you. I refuse to be a victim of narrative anymore. That's something you'll never understand because your entire career depends on poking at other people's lives. For the first time, Anderson's calm cracked, just slightly. His brow furrowed. He let the silence stretch, letting Harry sit in it. Finally, his voice returned, quiet but deliberate. Then let's look ahead. What do you see for yourself 10 years from now? What does life look like for Prince Harry? Harry gave a short, humorless laugh. It wasn't warm, it was weary, almost mocking. The future? Harry repeated, a sharp laugh slipping out. The future is mine. Not some press release I need to draft for public approval. I'll do what I want, when I want, and people can either accept that or choke on their expectations. Anderson tapped his pen once, twice. The movement was quiet, deliberate. His calm expression held, but behind it something flickered, fatigue maybe, or fire. He leaned back slightly, exhaling. Interesting, he murmured almost to himself. Then, looking up, his voice took on that careful edge he'd honed over decades. You know, Harry, I've interviewed people at their highest and lowest points, presidents in disgrace, soldiers fresh from war, families shattered by loss. They all had one thing in common. He paused. Humility. Do you think there's a risk you've lost some of that along the way? Harry stiffened, the smirk faltering into something colder. Humility? He scoffed. Don't lecture me about humility. I've lived through things you couldn't survive. If I come across as unapologetic, it's because I've earned that right. Humility is for people still begging for approval. I don't need anyone's. The words landed like stones in still water. The silence afterward was suffocating. Anderson gave a slow nod, his tone still calm, but now there was steel beneath it. That's one way of seeing it. The cameras kept rolling. Everyone in the room could feel the shift. The polite veneer had cracked wide open, leaving nothing but raw tension between the two men. Anderson adjusted slightly, his notepad untouched now, his pen still. "Harry," he said carefully, "you've spoken at length about control, about reclaiming your story. But critics point out that much of your public life, your book, your Netflix series, even this interview, still circles back to the monarchy. How do you respond to those who say you're trying to escape an institution you can't seem to let go of?" Harry gave a sharp, humorless laugh. "Critics. Always critics. They cling to their illusions, desperate to keep the crown shining. Let me be clear. I talk about it because it shaped me, because it scarred me. The monarchy isn't something you just walk away from. It brands you. And if I choose to expose it, that's my right. If people can't handle the truth, that's on them." Anderson lifted an eyebrow, his calm unwavering. "But you've also profited from those scars. Do you see a contradiction there?" Harry leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Profited? Tell me, Anderson, is it profit when you claw back pieces of yourself that were stolen, or is it survival?" "I took back my story. If people want to hear it, so be it. Better they hear it from me than from the tabloids you people quote like scripture." The bite in his tone drew an almost imperceptible tension from Anderson's jaw. His reply came measured but firm. "I don't quote tabloids. I ask questions the public wants answered." "There's a difference," Harry smirked. "Semantics. At the end of the day, you're still digging, still feeding the same public hunger for drama. You're no different than the rest." The insult hung heavy. For the first time, Anderson didn't mask his irritation completely. His voice cooled. "You've criticized the media relentlessly, and yet here you are once again in front of cameras. Is it fair to say you want the attention just on your own terms?" Harry's smile turned mocking. "Ah, the old trap question. Attention, fame, celebrity, you people love that narrative. I'm not here because I want your attention, Anderson. I'm here because you begged for mine. Let's not pretend otherwise." The arrogance rippled through the room. A producer shifted uncomfortably. Even the soft hum of studio lights seemed louder. Anderson sat motionless, absorbing the jab. His patience was holding, but barely. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's shift again. You've spoken often about your mother, her fight for independence, her courage in challenging the very institution you now condemn. Do you think she'd be proud of the way you've handled things?" Harry's expression froze. His eyes flashed, hurt, anger, something volatile. "Don't you dare sit there and use my mother as a prop in your broadcast," he snapped. "You never knew her. You don't know what she endured. You have no right to speculate about what she would or wouldn't think." Anderson let the silence expand. His voice, when it came, was low but edged. "I wasn't speculating. I was asking your perspective. There's a difference, Harry." Harry leaned back, his posture tightening, voice rising with disdain. "Perspective?" "My perspective," Harry said, his voice sharp enough to cut the air, "doesn't need your validation or anyone's. If you think you can corner me into some sentimental soundbite, you're wasting your time." Anderson's pen tapped once against his notepad, then fell still. He exhaled slowly, a deliberate act of control. "Very well," he said. "Let's talk about Meghan. Many admire her. Others, not so much. How has her role shaped the man you are today?" Harry gave a short, humorless laugh. "Here we go. Always Meghan, always the obsession. Let me make this clear. Meghan isn't my role model, she's my partner. If people can't accept that, then maybe they're still living in the past, just like you. Why don't you ask about my work, my projects, instead of parroting what the world already speculates about?" Anderson's smile tightened, professionalism straining at the edges. "I have asked about your work. You've steered every answer back to grievances, your family, the press. Do you think your critics might have a point? That your story has become more about resentment than purpose?" Harry's face hardened. His voice dropped to a growl. "Critics. Always the critics. I don't owe anyone a purpose. I don't owe you a tidy narrative. I live for myself, not for approval." The arrogance in the air was palpable. Anderson leaned forward slightly, his tone calm but edged with steel. "And yet here you are, on one of the most watched programs in America, demanding to be heard. That, Harry, is a contradiction worth noting." Harry's response came like venom. Spare me the lecture, Anderson. You feed on contradictions. Without people like me, you'd have nothing to fill your precious airtime. Remember that before you start moralizing. The silence that followed was suffocating. Crew members exchanged uneasy glances, the tension pressing down like a physical weight. Anderson's calm hadn't shattered, but it was stretched thin. Finally, he straightened, his voice low and deliberate. I've interviewed leaders, survivors, people who've faced unimaginable loss. They all carried themselves with dignity. What I'm seeing here, Harry, is something else entirely. Harry's eyes narrowed, a faint smirk curling at the edge of his mouth. Dignity is overrated. Survival's what matters. And I've survived more than you'll ever understand. The words hit with finality, but no grace. The room pulsed with hostility, the fuse burning dangerously close to its end. Anderson sat back, composure balanced on a knife's edge. The next question would decide everything. The studio had gone utterly still, alive with unspoken tension. Anderson Cooper's gaze remained steady, his tone even. Harry, let's take a step back. For nearly an hour, we've talked about family, about choices, about your life here in America. You've spoken a lot about control, Anderson said, voice calm but eyes sharp. About refusing to be defined by others. But tell me honestly, don't you think your defensiveness, your hostility, is defining you more than anything your family or the press ever could? Harry tilted his head, a smirk curling on his lips. Defensiveness? Hostility? I call it honesty. Something your industry's allergic to. The problem isn't me. It's people like you trying to shove me into a box labeled Royal Rebel or Tragic Prince. Newsflash. I don't fit the box, and I never will. Anderson's pen tapped once against his notepad before he leaned forward. His tone was no longer patient. It was steel. This isn't about fairy tales, Harry. It's about accountability. Every time I ask about your family, you lash out. When I ask about your wife, you scoff. When I ask about your future, you dismiss it. At what point do you stop blaming everyone else and start looking in the mirror? Harry's expression darkened. He leaned in too, his words sharp. You sit there in judgment, as if you know what it's like to be hounded every second of your life. You don't, none of you do, and yet you expect me to bow my head and answer politely. Those days are over. I play by my rules now. The air thickened. Every pair of eyes in the studio locked on the two men. Anderson's patience, stretched razor-thin, finally snapped. He set his pen down deliberately and met Harry's stare head-on. Let me tell you something, Anderson said quietly, but the words cut like glass. I've interviewed presidents under fire, soldiers rebuilding their lives, survivors of tragedy. They all had one thing in common: humility, gratitude, responsibility. What I see here isn't courage, Harry, it's arrogance. You call it honesty, I call it entitlement. Harry blinked, momentarily thrown off. Then he scoffed. Entitlement from you? You don't get to define me. You don't get to lecture me on humility. I've lived a life you couldn't survive a day in. Anderson shook his head slowly. No, Harry, you've been given a life most people couldn't imagine. And instead of using it with grace, you sneer at every question, treat every opportunity as an insult. That's not survival. That's self-destruction. The words landed heavy, final. Harry's jaw tightened, color rising in his cheeks. You think you can shame me? You think I owe you anything? I don't owe anyone an explanation, least of all you. Anderson didn't flinch. Then why are you here? Why sit in this chair, under these lights, if not to explain yourself? You rail against the media, yet you run toward the spotlight. You preach freedom, but you're chained to your bitterness. You want to be heard, Harry, but you refuse to listen. And that's why you're here alone. No institution, no family, and no respect you believe you deserve. Harry's fists clenched against the arms of his chair. His voice rose, raw and furious. You think you know me? You don't. You're just another vulture pretending to care. My family didn't deserve me. The monarchy didn't deserve me. Maybe the world doesn't either. But I'll live my truth whether you like it or not. Anderson leaned back, his expression cold now, all restraint gone. You want the truth? You're not living your truth. You're hiding behind it. You're not a brave rebel. You're a man who had everything and chose to burn it down, not out of purpose, but out of pride. And if Diana were here, I think she'd weep for what you've become. The words hit like a blow. Harry froze just for a moment before rage surged back to the surface. He shoved his chair back, the sound slicing through the air. "That's it," he spat. "I won't sit here and be insulted." "This interview is over," gasps rippled through the studio. A producer tried to interject, but Harry was already on his feet, storming toward the exit. His mic wire snapped free as he yanked it off, the metal clattering against the floor. Anderson watched him go, unflinching. Then he turned to the camera, voice steady but heavy. "Sometimes the hardest truth to hear is the one that cuts closest to the bone," he said. "Tonight you saw a man unwilling to face his reflection. That's his right. But our job is to ask and to listen, even when the answers come wrapped in anger." He exhaled, his tone softening as the camera zoomed closer. "To our viewers, I want to thank you for staying with us. We hoped for honesty and reflection. What we got was something else entirely. But maybe in its own way, that revealed more than any answer could." The camera lingered on Anderson's face for a long, silent beat, then faded to black. Across the country, living rooms buzzed. The prince who came to tell his truth had walked away instead, leaving behind not understanding, but controversy. And somewhere, in the comment sections that would ignite within minutes, a single question waited. Was this the night the world saw Harry's truth, or just another performance of it?